Hey friends, it's Liv, Chief Food Wizard at Apocalicious. Today we're breaking up! Record numbers of couples called it quits during the COVID-19 pandemic. Why? Too much togetherness thanks to international lockdown. We're currently gearing up for a second wave and another potential lockdown, so I imagine breakups will spike once again. If you're stuck in a disappointing or suffocating relationship, it might be high time to leave it behind. In fact, if you just can't even anymore, then I implore you to move on. Or at least reflect on the pros and cons of your partnership while digging into today's delicious recipe. Our Let That Man Go sorbet was inspired by this global plight. I hope it gives you more than just cold comfort in these stressful times. This creamy and indulgent sorbet is the spoonful of sugar you need right now to help the medicine go down. It'll give you just enough of an upper to really hash this out internally. It's dead simple to make and involves just 3 ingredients. Let's make some, shall we? Pretty much anyone can enjoy this delicious sorbet because it's vegan, gluten-free, and free of major allergens. It whips up in minutes with ingredients you might already have in your freezer and pantry. I know you're gonna love it. If you'd like to print or save this written recipe, be sure to visit our website apocalicious.com to get it. Also be sure to like this video and subscribe for more. We'll share a new recipe video each week. Now let's make this thing. Friends, these are frustrating days indeed, but remember, we're all on this together, except when we'd much rather be sheltering in place far apart. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay frosty. Let's talk ingredients. This recipe is awesome because it's only going to involve 3 ingredients, which you may already have. We start with frozen mango. If you wanted to make this with a different fruit, you could easily substitute another frozen fruit. To that, we're going to add a little bit of a nice tasting salt. I'm using pink Himalayan salt, but something like sea salt would be nice. And a little bit of sweetener. I used maple syrup. You could use agave, coconut nectar, whatever you've got. And our method is really where the majority of this recipe comes in. I'm going to use a food processor for this. There really isn't a replacement for a food processor in this recipe. You could make this in a blender, but it would be too watery because you'd be forced to add liquid. The beauty of the food processor is it will blend all of these mangoes into a very thick gelato-like consistency, all by themselves without the need for any liquid. Now, in terms of technique, I start by pulsing as I blend and holding really firmly on the top of my food processor because otherwise the lid may pop off. You may break the interior of your food processor, and this is just because in this case I'm using mango, and mango gets extremely hard when frozen, so it really does some damage in there if you're not really secure. And what I do is I stop and scrape down the inside of my food processor bowl pretty frequently throughout this recipe, and the reason for that is because the mango chunks will get stuck just in the little crevices that are naturally on the inside of a food processor. So it's important to stop and make sure that they're not just hanging out up there where they don't belong, because they're not going to get properly blended if they sit there for too long. So as you can see, I'm stopping and I'm also scraping down the sides to make sure that what I'm blending is actually engaging with the blade. When you kind of just leave it to do its own thing, some might get blended, some will still be chunky, so really important to just sort of stop and start as you go. And as you can sort of see here, the mixture looks sort of chunky, and that's going to be the case for most of your blending process until suddenly it looks like gelato. So don't be discouraged. I've seen a lot of people make recipes like this where they're following someone else's recipe and they get really distraught because they end up with this sort of mealy texture and they can't figure out what they did wrong. What you did wrong is you didn't blend it long enough. So again, just be patient and keep scraping it. Now, as you can see, the mixture is starting to get a little bit more homogeneous, so it's starting to actually like pull together into almost like a ball, the way when you make cookie dough in a food processor or something like that does. It sort of starts to roll around in one piece instead of spreading out evenly. So that's supposed to happen. So again, just keep scraping it down to make sure that the entirety of the mixture gets blended properly. As you can see, this already looks like gelato. You can eat this by itself if you prefer an unsweetened fruit sorbet, but frozen mango doesn't tend to have a ton of flavor, so I find that it really benefits from a little bit of salt and a little bit of sweetener. I really like the combo of maple syrup and mango. If you don't, you could incorporate something like cane sugar, but you'd really need to blend it after you incorporate it to make sure that the sugar dissolves and it's not gritty. So again, this sort of starts you back to phase 1 where you're trying to get rid of any chunks, because once you add that liquid, it's going to really show a distinct texture separation between the frozen mango gelato and the sweetener. Don't be confident that you can skip the step and put the sweetener in first. I find if you add any liquid in the beginning, then the texture that you get out of the mango is going to be a lot more mealy. So you really want to blend the mango on its own first before you add any other ingredients. Now, I like to take an extra step of freezing my gelato in a shallow container with an airtight lid. You don't have to do this. If you like the texture of soft serve, you could eat your gelato right at this moment, and it would be really good. It might actually be even a bit more flavorful because it isn't as frozen. But if you prefer that like thick, classic gelato texture, then I really recommend freezing it. So here's how I do it. I like to add all of my mixture into the base of my freezer-safe airtight container. And after it's all in there, I like to do a bit of a meditative exercise of smoothing it out. You want to make sure that you don't end up with air pockets where you're kind of exposing more of the gelato to air, and as a result, encouraging it to kind of crystallize and freeze too solidly. So I really like to push it down and just sort of smooth it out. If you've ever seen one of those, I don't know, like sand gardens, like Japanese little like meditation gardens, where they're constantly pushing sand back and forth in interesting patterns. You can do that here for hours if you're like me, but try to resist and just make sure that it's all sort of on one level so that it freezes evenly. So now I pop on my lid. I just found these containers. They're really great and they lock and they're very airtight. And I freeze it for 1 to 2 hours. So now it's frozen. And I'm just gonna take my lid off. Come on. What the f? God damn it. Who made this? Open. Ugh. I might. Oh. Oh, okay. Thank God. Okay, so now it's time to serve. So I'm just using a standard ice cream scoop for this. As you can see, it's quite scoopable after 1 to 2 hours. It really does look like ice cream at this point. There you have it. That is our Let That Man Go sorbet. Enjoy!